Hello and welcome to Kickstart 2024 in Amsterdam. I am now joined by Jim Simonelli, SVP and CTO for the Secure Power Division at Schneider Electric. And Jim, pleasure speaking to you. You got a long trip to come to sunny Amsterdam. It's usually not sunny.
Beautiful, yeah.
But Boston, that's a 7-hour trip?
Yeah, about 7 hours. I can see the temperature is about the same, so I'm okay without the temperature shock, but yeah, it's beautiful.
But I mean, the temperature might be cold, but inside is very hot inside of this conference because, I mean, the industry is booming. And when we talk about AI, then the conversation just explodes to 10, 20, 30 times more everything that we're doing.
Right.
So my question to you, coming from a powerhouse, an electric powerhouse, is how is AI changing the energy consumption within the data center? And also, what are the operational challenges that the facility faces now?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. You know, if we were talking maybe 2 years ago, there's no doubt the data center industry was booming already. And we weren't predicting as quite a large impact on the workloads because of AI. You know, now many projections, whether it be the IEA projections or even our own data center projections or our projections in our white paper 110, we're probably adding close to 300 terawatt hours of new data center capacity in the next 4 years, of which 30% of that is being driven by AI. But what's interesting is not all AI is treated the same. We tend to like it because it's got the same two initials, but there's a very distinct impact on the data center industry when we think about training AI, which is how large language models are actually first generated, and then the use of AI, which is the inference side. And what's happening right now in the industry is that we're very focused on how to scale the training side. You know, which is happening today because there's ChatGPT as exists today, but to do it at scale is requiring everyone to rethink a bit about, you know, how we can reject heat from those servers, which are almost all liquid cooled, and they're also very, very dense. So how do we get the power to that space? So everyone is revamping their lines of liquid cooling solutions. In Schneider, we're working on a new line of cooling distribution units, heat rejection, dealing with hot air, hotter air, and more dense power systems as well for those training side, for sure. So it's definitely changed on that dimension. The other side is actually more about being more efficient and continuing down those trends, things that we've been doing for years already.
Yeah, because this is, I think the industry has done quite well in terms of sustainability. It just hasn't been very good at telling the story.
Yeah,
That's an issue that we've had for the last 10 years, and it's now starting to bite people back.
Yeah.
Again, on the back of AI, so much use, so many bigger data centers. But I was going to say, so from those things that you're preparing to launch, that you already have, when you speak to clients, to partners, to customers, what are the challenges that everyone is facing in these new AI worlds? What do you see are the pain points when trying to build for this?
Yeah, so a lot of it is the uncertainty. So, you know, I think if you know, depending on the customer that we're speaking to, so if we're speaking to a co-location facility as a customer, which aren't the end users, you know, but they're trying to put a facility that can adapt to different types of workloads. And they're hearing things around, you know, deploying 100 kilowatt per rack liquid cooling to anything from, hey, is my workload gonna get up to 20 to 30 kilowatts per rack, and how do I fill that space? So there, you know, the conversation is much more around, well, what's the client base, and how do we make sure that we can get the most out of the existing space, you know, that's already there. That by far is the most sustainable thing that anybody can do. And that is mostly on the inferencing side, which is really where the co-location space is likely to be first built out. The very high performance computing centers are probably more specialized build in the next few years for sure. So not teasing those two things is the biggest challenge that I think we face right now that's in that space with AI. The other piece, if it's an end client, it is they hear about, you know, AI, and you know it comes down to what type of compute do they need, and you know, most of the commercial, you know, IT providers, whether it be Dell, Lenovo, HP, all in those space, are providing, you know, servers that are well tuned for inferencing servers, and frankly, they don't look a heck of a lot different than some of the servers that are out today. So you can see the anxiety release out of their brains. Now, they're more powerful, there's more GPUs for sure, but it's not like everything all of a sudden you have to change the way you're thinking about it for the inferencing side of the planet, which is by far the majority of the workloads out there.
Let's just get someone in one of the morning sessions, he was talking about a dinner that he attended a few weeks ago back in London with a lot of enterprises, so banks, media companies, retail companies, and he was said from this and decided he said he was shocked on how scared they were of all this because they thought they're going to go over and over by it. So of course I had to make the point of, like, we invented cars, we managed to get through it. People thought cars were going to kill everyone when they were first invented 100 years ago. So I think that's kind of the revolution that we're going through. What do you think is the most exciting use case you can think of maybe something that's already in place, and then one that you dream of. What's your dream AI use case? Let's go for the reality first. And then for the dream.
So I'll give you some real interesting use cases or use case right now. To be clear, we're in the first stages of AI. It's called narrow AI, and we're actually in the short memory AI, which is the ChatGPT assistance dimensions as well. What I've seen is a couple of things. One is the quality and integrity of be able to support customers through having assistance. We might think of them as ChatGPT today, but tailored to that area. You can see the customer satisfaction scores go quickly up, where you can actually ask a natural language and get some very robust answers to that space. So it really is helping industries to scale and provide better services to the customers. That's actually what's driving some very interesting things. The second dimension in the near term, without being too, is the ability to kind of research and understand topics that you know just enough about, but it's hard to search for because it's all. But if you can get good at prompting, you can really uncover some basic knowledge of some very in-depth topics. Like I was doing some research on general relativity. I thought I knew this, but it really kind of helped explore topics that I didn't know much about. But get enough depth that I felt like I was talking to a physics professor, and that got my mind going in directions I never thought could be before. So I actually think there's some innovation components that are happening today just because it's more accessible.
Interesting. And then, your CEO, you got a new global CEO as well.
Yes.
GPT is kind of
moved chairman
into another role.
Yeah.
But your new CEO has been very vocal about his wish to really support the data center industry expand in the next few years. So we can expect a lot of investment from Schneider itself on expanding its operations. Where are you on that journey? Because if we're going to double, triple the market size in the next 5 years, how is Schneider going to support the globe in its transition as well?
Yeah, so it's coming in 3 dimensions. So the first dimension is ensuring that we have the capacity to meet demand. Remember, the solutions that we're being deployed today, while they are evolving, in their designs, a lot of it's just, can we build more of the same stuff or similar stuff, advanced stuff with high integrity and quality around the globe. So that's one big investment that Peter has talked about, or we've talked about. The second is you need the skills for project teams, for commercial teams to support that globally. That's another investment that we're making into Sure. The third, closest to me, is on the R&D side. So we're not caught flat-footed in the data center space at all. We've been talking about liquid cooling, high density, heat reuse. We have some of the most dense UPSs on the planet. But there's some things that we're trying to accelerate on the R&D side to not just meet the demands of the next 2 years, but starting in 27 and 28 further on, which is the other part of the acceleration going on as well.
You can't just stop there now. Now you've got to tell us what you're planning for 26, 27, 28.
So I think you see things. So a few things that you can talk about there. So one is, whenever you think about heat rejection and the use of chillers and refrigeration cycles, to the extent that we have to use them, the idea is that we need to do this with natural refrigerants, just because of decarbonization, some of the regulations in that space. Some very interesting things in that dimension. The others with heat reuse. As the quality of heat increases up, there's much more interesting things that we can do in that area. The last is, and I'll just leave this more vague, I call it converged energy. This is the notion that a data center itself is not just kind of 3 separate systems of maybe it has a microgrid, maybe it has a generator, maybe it has a UPS. They're all kind of merging together as one single system that is really setting the tone for the future of how dense power or densification and high value of power distribution inside data centers is changing. So just some hints of to come in those spaces as well.
Actually, let me pick up your brains on energy and data centers, because we've seen data centers investing a lot in solar parks, wind farms. There's a lot of PPA activity going around. Can data centers become energy providers? Energy makers and providers? Like how do you see the intersection of data centers and the energy industry? Can we sell back to the grid? And is this where we're going?
So I think that's that's one of the undertapped assets that's out there right now. So a lot of data centers will still buy PPAs, so they'll offset their costs. Even the large hyperscalers will offset their costs through PPAs, which is good for the short term. But you can't do that forever, because usually you're buying PPAs that are in other regions that you're not necessarily associated with. Not always the case. So it's beneficial in general, but really what we have an opportunity in front of us is the fact that data centers, they're large loads. 30 megawatts is a small data center. Campuses go to 100 to 300 megawatts. That's a large load that can become very can become a dynamic asset to a grid to enable more renewables to attach locally. So not only does the data center get benefit of the cleaning of the carbon mix that they're using, but also the region does as well. So to do that, you don't actually have to sell back power. You just have to use less. If I added adding a 10 megawatt generator is the same thing as reducing power by 10 megawatts. And if I can do that dynamically with a clever use of storage and maybe some load control, what you start seeing is that a 100 megawatt data center can actually be an asset to enable more renewables on the local grid as it becomes that asset to kind of dynamically work with intermittent resources. And that really is the path forward that we see emerging.
Let me ask you this, as a CTO, as a tech person,
Sure.
and someone aficionado by R&D, what technology or innovation do you think is going to completely disrupt this sector in the next few decades? And not something that we have already. So mine is DNA storage. I think that's going to be quite, if they get it right, it's going to be quite, it's going to be quite something. It's going to change the market.
Yeah. One thing I can say is it's going to happen on the IT side. Just remember, we build, so I'm a power electronics guy from background, so I know that dimension, but if you think about the data center segment at all, we're not building data centers for the sake of data centers. The idea is that we're serving IT needs, compute needs. It's really on the compute side where you start seeing the transformative changes. Obviously with with quantum DNA storage, I spend a lot of time on that end of the business because that's actually what shapes what the future is going to be like. So you picked up on one that I thought was very interesting on DNA storage.
I just read it a few years ago, and I mean Microsoft was just starting.
There's opportunities, it really can be. So I don't want to get too far out and into the future.
Oh, this is far out.
But I think that's actually where the industry will shape quite a bit. I think that there is certainly the notion of, back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, it was how do I make more efficient tubes, and the transistor came along. Then there was spinning disk drives, and it was all solid state. So you're starting to see these changes emerge that really shape, how data centers will be built. And I don't know with biologics, with different dimensions that energy sources may not be either need the same intensity. Or maybe they may need a different form of energy in the future in this space, very futuristic.
This almost fiction side of the world is quite interesting. I mean, there's this idea of a data center tree, where it's all just nature and you store everything on the tree and then you download. It's very Avatar-ish. There's those things going around. There's those like really out of this world ideas.
Right.
Which of course we're not talking about them because it's not like the business day to day. But I just thought as a tech person, like you will be the right person to kind of get excited about it.
That's it. You definitely get me going on that side. There may be more pub conversations, but it's exciting.
We can have a drink if you want. But bringing it back to reality now and to the world that we live in. I mean, we're still going through we're going through a power crisis. Especially in Europe. The world is a bit upside down on a lot of different verticals. What would you say are some of the positive outlooks for this industry now, for the journey until 2030? 2030 is only 3 quarters away. So how can we ensure that despite everything else that's happening outside of this building, how can we ensure that we can still deliver those 2030 goals? Are they achievable to begin with by 2030? And how do we navigate all this uncertainty and everything? And what's the positive outlook that you've got to share?
Yeah, so I'm generally a bit more positive on the outcomes here, but I think that it's going to be a bumpy road over the next 4 to maybe 6 years or so. There's not a smooth path, but we're used to an area where we want to build a data center or put things just where we want them. That's not happening anymore. There's no doubt that there is power constraints, but the power constraints are very specific to specific regions, countries, where you might have 30% of the workloads might be data center or it might be data center driven, where others it's much less. So what's happening is there's a bit of a guided supply happening right now where data centers are being located by market forces where there is actually available power, which is a good thing. But the next 3 things that really have to happen to break through the 2030 barrier to satisfy those needs are really kind of 3 things. One is hyper focus on efficiency of data centers, and not just the infrastructure, but also on the IT side. The notion of extrapolating, just look at the evolution of GPUs from NVIDIA, using them as one example, how efficient they've gotten over just in 3 generations. There is going to be the need to make sure that we utilize existing capacity to its fullest. And that's one thing that's going to free up. We get more clever there and actually put more of that projected compute in existing spaces. That's one lever. The second lever I already talked a little bit about is where there is constraints and we have to add more power, more renewable power, you actually do have to think about storage, whether on-site or offset, as a key element to enable more capacity, renewable capacity to come on quicker in that space. So that's the other dimension that will help us through that area, where it's not just a load, but it's a load that can be an asset to add more capacity. The third is that every operator grid operator is adding capacity, adding generation and transmission capacity, not just for data centers, but for the electrification of electric vehicles, which are growing far faster than data centers in those spaces. And the fact that if we can help enable that faster, then that's what gets us through the next 4 to 6 years. It's going to be bumpy. You're not going to be putting capacity in data centers in areas that are highly constrained, but there are unconstrained areas for certain workloads, particularly with these training workloads, where it relieves some of the space. Beyond 2030, I think that there starts becoming a reasonable amount of capacity that to meet the demands. Remember, it's not data centers; it's actually driving not just data. It's electricity drives economies, and there's an understanding that that making sure that there is enough capacity to ensure economies can thrive is one of the key factors that's driving basically the economy of the planet.
And unfortunately, what's happening between Russia and Ukraine has kind of woken up governments to that reality in the last 2 years. And we've seen that especially in Europe with the amount of investment. I believe the amount of investment that has gone into sustainable and green energy in the last 2-3 years, it's more than the past few decades put together, just on the back of this. So at least one positive of something really
it's
bad.
It's that, oftentimes those constraints drive innovation, and capital investment that was typically staying on the sideline is now coming out. And again, as tragic as things are, it is driving enough of a forcing function for some investments that ultimately will help us in the long term as well.
Okay, I'm cautious of the time, but there's an ocean between us, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions.
Please.
Geography-wise, so when you get orders in of things to either build, to research, to develop, where do you see, how do the different regions, what are the different requests from the different regions? So for example, like South Europe versus the Nordics, colder, warmer climate, north of the US, Texas. So how do you see those things shaping up, and what do they tell you of the markets and these different regions, and especially when you go to emerging regions, like what requests are you coming from, like Latin America, from Africa? I mean, the world is your oyster now.
So it's interesting because what I tend to do, it's kind of the interesting part of my job is the fact that I do listen to needs and challenges around the globe, and they're not uniform. It's very heterogeneous. Based on climate, based on workforce, based on the type of energy supply, which didn't used to be a factor. Now the greenness of the energy actually makes a difference as well. It's a tough needle to thread across the globe. Some of the things that I think is common around, which is what I look for, is everyone is trying to build fast, and they're trying to build sustainably, and they're trying to build for the best. Still for the best CapEx models available. So we try to look for things that can be standardized to scaled across the globe. And this is true for even some of the hyperscalers that have to build across the globe. They will make compromises to make sure they can standardize to be able to build across the globe versus optimizing for each region. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see, because again, the needs and demands of what's going on in the Nordics is different than in Europe, is different than in the east to west of Texas, east to west of the United States, and certainly in Asia as well. So that's probably the biggest demands. The things that we really have to kind of watch out for is actually on the heat rejection side, because that's the most impactful based on geographies and based on supply of water or no water. It's currently very bespoke to where countries are, and as water temperatures and air temperatures become hotter, you start normalizing a bit, that you can now get more scale on that side as well. So I think that's a bit of the future that's in front of us. Well, it's some of the variations will start normalizing out a bit as we can strive for harder, more efficient, more sustainable data centers, which is what everyone's striving for. Particularly if you're a net zero committed company. That's where the ball is going.
Okay, you touched on water. I think we're going to have to leave that to a part two of this conversation. My last question to you would be, because we are at Kickstart 2024, what does a conference like this mean to you as an attendee, but also what does it mean for a company like Schneider? And last thing, because I don't ask just one thing, it's always several things at the same time. Of course,
last few things.
When you look into 2025 in 12 months' time for the next edition, what do you think is going to be the topic that's going to be on everyone's mouth next year?
So firstly, answering the first area, I think that the biggest thing that both myself and Schneider gets out of this is coming here with big ears, which is listening. You're listening to a great mix of end users, colo providers, and even competitors in the space. You get a great sense and tone for what's the pulse of the industry right now. That's certainly something that I value, coming here quite a bit. It's a conference where a lot of people here. It's the beginning of the year. Everyone's fresh in their mind, so it's great. It's great for that space. I'm horrible at predicting the future. So if you say next year, I think that it's hard to back too far away from the AI topic, because I think we're just seeing the beginnings of that. I think the conversation will be more realistic around this training versus inference. Right now it's still very generic on the two letters of AI. I think that'll be the hot topic. I think it's also going to be much more into the use of AI. It's not just how to build to support it, but how can we use AI to enable more operational, sustainable, and efficient data centers moving forward as well.
Yeah, because the use of AI in the data center itself, that's going to be a whole new segment
of
developing these facilities. It's going to be very, very interesting. We've seen a few data centers trying to put a few nodes and alarms and smart
early
devices.
stages.
IoT, the IoT of the data center. It's going to be very exciting. But Jim Simonelli, thank you so much for talking to me. It's a pleasure.
Great.
I hope you get to enjoy Amsterdam a little bit more before you get on a flight.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's a fun city, so no loss for excitement here.
I'm sure the weather is not an impediment for you.
That's okay, not a problem
I'm
at
sure
all.
it's a lot colder back home. But Jim, thank you so much.
Great.
As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website for more breaking news of the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.